I'm Bo Matthews, and you're listening to the None Left Behind podcast, powered by Special Operations Charity Network. This is where warriors find their tribe, stories find their voice, and hope finds a way. Real talk, real people, real missions. From the front lines to the home front, we've got your six. Now, here's your host, John Launius, with other supportive voices from the Special Operations Charity Network and the Find Your Tribe Initiative.
Welcome to None Left Behind, the podcast of the Special Operations Charity Network. None Left Behind connects, honors, and empowers active military, veterans, first responders, and their families. We share real stories, foster community, and bridge the gap between service and civilian life, so no one stands alone and no one gets left behind. My name is John Launius, and I'm your host. I'm now here with Michael Anderson. Michael Anderson is a military veteran who's a manager of military funerals. How are you?
Good. Nice to meet you, John.
Nice to meet you. Now, before we talk about that, give us a little sense of your military background.
Well, John, I spent 8 years in the military in the Army Reserves. I was stationed in Cherokee, Iowa for my first unit. I spent 13 months in Iraq. I drove trucks for the military. Basically what most people consider a commercial semi that you'd see on the road is what I drove here in the States. And then over in Iraq, I was driving an M1000 HET, which stands for Heavy Equipment Transporter. They were designed to haul tanks, artillery, big D9 dozers, the type of things that you'd need a trailer with 40 tires on it to keep aloft. We got to go to all the finest vacation destinations that Saddam Hussein's regime had to offer. And so that's kind of where I came from.
Yeah. So, kind of alluding at that, we're going to talk about military funerals and what that means, because I think this is a subject that maybe not a lot of people know about. What is a defining moment from your time in the military that might inform what you're doing today?
Oh, John, definitely my time spent in Iraq. That really shaped me as a person. It changed the way I viewed the world. It gave me, insights and opportunities to understand things that I never understood before. Like there's TV commercials where they're like, for 5 cents a day, you can feed the starving child.
Right.
But you don't really see that level of poverty most of the time here in the United States. And then to get to go to Iraq and see people that were living on top of trash piles and they just spend their lives sifting through the trash trying to find things to resell to make a living. That was a frequent occurrence over there. We run into that just about every single time we drive through. So.
Okay. So what is it that you do specifically today with military funerals?
So I'm the manager for military funeral honors at Jefferson Barracks. I cover about a third of the state of Missouri's funeral honors program. Though geographically, I've got the smallest region of control because of how dense St. Louis is. So when an eligible veteran passes away with an honorable or under honorable conditions discharge, things of that nature, or a retirement certificate, they contact a funeral home or come directly to us and say, hey, our veteran, our retiree just passed away. We would like a military funeral honors ceremony. They send us paperwork, we look at it, we verify that they've met the eligibility requirements, things of that nature, and then we make sure that the mortuary affairs office for each branch of service receives the paperwork. Though for the Army and we handle that in-house. We have soldiers that work out of my office that cover that. And the reason we get all of the requests for every branch, which is unique to Missouri, is because we provide firing parties for every single veteran, whereas most states only provide them for retirees.
Right. Now, this is not to make a joke, but if somebody was hearing this out of context, when you say firing party, people are like, "Oh, you're going to let me go." So, what does that exactly mean, and what's the criteria for that?
Okay, so per federal guidelines, a firing party is only granted to people that have retired from the military, either because they spent enough time in there or they got medically discharged and were given a medical retirement.
Okay.
Most people that have never seen it before aren't really intimately familiar with military funerals. They sometimes call it a 21-gun salute because that's what the movies and Hollywood calls it.
Right.
And so we get a lot of calls saying, hey, is my husband or my son going to get a 21-gun salute? That's not how it works. We actually send out 3 people to hold rifles. They fire 3 volleys, and each, so 9 rounds total. 21-gun salute is a real thing, but it only happens for people like the president when they pass away.
Oh, okay.
So if your military post, active duty post has cannons. When a president passes away or somebody of high enough importance, they will fire off the cannons a certain amount of times, and that's where that comes from. You might get that on like naval ships for certain high-ranking naval officers, things of that nature as well.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Did you know that every time that you tune in to a new episode of the Sotkin Podcast, you get a free raffle entry? The prize packages are always a surprise, but here are some of our awesome sponsors to pique your interest. Holosun Optics, OD Gear, Gators Eyewear, Champion Safes, Intrepid Defense, American Rebel, Ignite Performance and Health, and much more. So stay tuned for your free entry code. So on this podcast, we talk a lot about fostering community and bridging the gap between service and civilian life. So moving from your time in the military to what you're doing now, what was that transition like? And is there any philosophy or any thoughts for folks that are watching this that are about to transition or maybe transitioning in the next year or two, some words of wisdom that would help them?
John, one thing I'd really recommend is joining a VSO community like the VFW, the American Legion, the PAWV. It took me, I got out in 2010 and I joined this job in 2019. It wasn't, but for 9 years until I really realized what I was missing in life. And that was that sense of camaraderie that I got in the military. If I could go back and do it differently, I would have definitely tried to get a hold of some sort of veteran service organization group to join a part of so that I could continue that sense of purpose, or at least that friendship, atmosphere that I used to have. That was the biggest thing that hit me when I got out, and I didn't understand how bad it was gonna hurt until much later.
And when you mean, like, specifically, what do you mean by hurt?
So, I mean, if you've been in the military, everybody around you is one big family, and just like every family, you've got people you really love and you got people that you really hate, but they're still your family. Right. And the military is very much like that. And you go from always having these people around you that you know and trust to losing touch with a lot of them if you don't keep in contact. You're not going to your military job if you're active duty. You don't have drill anymore once a month to go back and meet up with everybody and have that sense of purpose. Your life isn't as clearly defined anymore. The military is really good for people that want rigid structure, and a lot of people that spend their only job in life. Somebody that's been active duty for 8 years and they join when they're 18. They've been told what to do. They've done a thing. They know exactly what's expected of them, and all of a sudden you get out and you don't know anymore. You don't know what you're supposed to be doing. It's difficult, and if you don't have a proper plan, to coming out of it for when you're getting ready to ETS or get out of the military, it can really creep up on you really fast. That sense of loneliness. Yeah.
So you said something interesting when you talked about being involved in a VSO. What's the importance of community, and maybe what are some other suggestions around getting involved in things?
Well, for the VSO groups, part of the reason I really recommend that is because a lot of people get really depressed when they leave military service. And part of the thing that keeps them, I wouldn't say normal per se, but that really keeps people going is when they're in and they've got those people around them. They're constantly surrounded by people that understand what they've been through. And then when you leave the service, if you don't have that anymore, you're just left with the sense of helplessness, like nobody gets you, nobody understands. And I think that's a big driving force to the problem we have today with military suicide, and its really high rate, especially for people that have been to combat and things of that nature.
So I think this is a really good transition to talk about challenge and support. You've kind of talked a little bit about the challenges. So what are you doing in your role that is supporting our either active military, our veterans, or our first responders?
Well, so I've got a lot of soldiers that walk in and out of office. We also have people from the VSO groups that do firing parties for us for veterans. They come in and out, and so we're constantly hearing problems. And I got a lot of new soldiers that come and work for us, and of course, new soldiers aren't necessarily always the best with understanding finances, things of that nature. Fresh out of high school, they've never really had to live on their own up to this point. And so, though it's not necessarily my job to help them out, I take a lot of pride in working with them. They have problems. We send them to VSO groups. Just about every single VSO group out there has some sort of fund or program to help out veterans or soldiers that are down in their luck or starting out. Somebody somebody's got a huge car payment because they just bought a fancy new car right out of boot camp in AIT, and they can't afford their rent. A lot of the VSO groups, if you talk to them or send soldiers there and explain their situation, sometimes they'll vote and say, hey, let's help this person out. They're behind $600 on their rent, and they might just hand them a check and say, here, this is to take care of you and make sure that you're good.
So back to your current role, what does the repatriation process mean, or what happens with that?
Well, so to backtrack a little bit towards everything, so we've been involved in a lot of conflicts over the years, and unfortunately in places like World War I, World War II, Vietnam, it's so chaotic that not everybody gets to come home. You might be in the middle of a conflict and somebody gets shot and they can't take the time to stop and pick them up. They're already dead. They have to move on, otherwise it risks more lives.
Right.
And so sometimes those bodies get left behind. They can't find them again for whatever reason in the chaos, the jungles of Vietnam, etc. And then so, fast forward to today, we have this military unit that they spend their whole time going around to different grave sites, liaising with other governments, trying to find the remains of soldiers that have been left behind. They've got this big project where they track down this area. We know that more than likely these people never came home. Let's go and find their families. They ask them if they're willing to give a DNA sample just in case so they can match it up with people that they find, because other governments are constantly finding new burial sites and saying, hey, we think these might be yours, and then they come over to the United States, back to one of our military bases, and they start the process to try to figure out, hey, who was this person? Do we know? If we don't know, do they get sent to the tomb of the unknown until we know, etc. And then every so often, or pretty often, I'd say, because we've got a pretty large sampling at this point. We know where they came from. We know who they are. We contact the next of kin, the closest relatives. Or maybe it's somebody that they knew still. Maybe it's somebody that just they've heard about in family lore, because everybody from that generation has passed. And then the military will send out a casualty assistance officer to meet with them and explain the process. And we work on getting the remains here. Like if it's a much older veteran, maybe we've got a hip bone, just unfortunately just a few pieces that were returned, but at least we got something we know, and then they get to come home. So when they come back here, they end up coming on a plane. They've got a casket, it's got a flag draped over it, and it comes in a box, cardboard box, wooden pallet on the bottom, and then it gets to whatever airport it's going to be going to, and then we send soldiers out onto the tarmac to perform a small ceremony where we move the remains of the veteran, the repatriated remains, into the hearse, and then we go to the funeral home and haul it inside. So
in your role, what's probably one of the most profound stories about that experience for you?
So when we're doing these repatriated ceremonies, part of the process is they come to a stop where we put them on a mock-up table, and the family gets to come up and see the casket and be next to the remains for the first time in, for some of these families, 50, 60, almost 100 years. Or for if it's a veteran that's passed away on active duty, it's the first time seeing them since this has happened, and they get to take the time to go up and grieve, and it's hard. It's hard watching that. It's hard keeping dry eyes. There's so many people in my family have been in the military that I take it very personally. We spend a lot of time training for these situations to try to be as perfect as possible for these people, to give them some sense of comfort and relief. And that first moment when the family walks in to view the remains, you watch their faces, you can see what they're going through, and then you watch them break down, and you've got to stand there and hold it together, to be some kind of rock, even if you don't know them personally, to try to help get through in our own little way. And I think that's the biggest part of this that I really, really love.
So you talked about foreign wars in this case, but as a Civil War historian, it just fascinates me that we continue to find more remains in many places. How does the process work for someone fallen during the Civil War?
It's the same as anybody else. If we find the remains, if we can identify the family, it'll be the same process. We'll check DNA records, things of that nature. It's a little bit murkier because it's harder to get genealogy going all the way back sometimes. I mean, there's plenty of places that do it. There's genealogy societies that exist to help out with that sort of thing. And we have military historians that work with these units to try to make this happen. But if they can't be identified and we don't know who they are, they go to the tomb of the unknown soldier.
Got it. So for those that are watching this that maybe are not military, or maybe they're a military spouse, are there ways to get involved with what you're doing from a volunteer standpoint? And if so, how can they do that?
Unfortunately, on our end of things, you have to have been in the military. To work for Missouri's Military Funeral Honors Program, you either have to currently serve or have served in the past.
Got it.
So every single person in my office is either a veteran or current soldier. So they do have certain volunteer things at the National Cemetery, like they got like wreaths across America that comes out in certain times of the year to lay as many wreaths as they can across. The Boy Scouts are really heavily involved with that. You can certainly go and out to, it's some sort of Wreaths Across America website. I don't know the specific one. You should be able to Google it.
Right.
And you can volunteer to come out and lay wreaths and things of that nature. If you happen to be a currently serving soldier, you can certainly get a hold of us at our office and say, hey, I'd like to work for you. We pay soldiers to come out and do our services.
Yeah.
We have soldiers that work on orders for us full-time, and we have soldiers that we pay on a part-time basis.
Yeah. So when I'm thinking about the intention behind None Left Behind, which is to foster community, to bridge the gap between service and civilian life, to really, share meaningful stories, create connection, things like that, what I'd love for you to do is just kind of go on a train of thought response in that kind of encapsulate everything you've done and maybe give people an opportunity to reach out to you, connect. What are your thoughts on all that?
I love it. Part of my job is liaising with the public, coming out and doing interviews like this. I get to speak at the Daughters of the Union Soldiers of the American Revolution for their convention. I get to spend a lot of time going and talking about the flag and what it means in our program. And it's probably my second favorite part about the job is getting to go out and spread awareness of the program, things of that nature. It's a lot of fun.
All right, I'm back with your friendly reminder to grab your free entry code for our raffle. How do you do it? Well, keep your eye on the text at the bottom of the screen at some point during the podcast, or listen for the code at the end. Don't miss out. So your story is really fascinating, and what you do is fascinating because, again, I don't think a lot of people understand what you do and how you do it. And so what I'd love for you to do now is just kind of go on a train of thought response to what are some thoughts, some ideas. Because when you talk about None Left Behind, we're about fostering community. We're about bridging the gap between service and civilian life. So what are your thoughts?
Well, John, I think a big part of what I'd really like to tell everybody is, when you get out of the military, please go and find a veteran service organization. I think a big part of the problem we have as veterans is we lose touch with our community. And those are the people that we depend on, the people that understand the things that we've been through, the people with similar life experiences that just get us. I spent, it took me 9 years to find military funeral honors, and I didn't really understand what I was missing until I joined this job. I have my own set of quirks. I would wake my wife up screaming in the middle of the night, and it wasn't until I started working at this job that I actually started to slow down, and slowly I'd have longer and longer distances between episodes. While I was working with veterans and really, I think it was a great thing for me. Really helped the healing process, and VSO groups are very much a lot like that as well. I think the younger soldiers don't really understand what the VSO groups have to offer. It's a dwindling member base. They do our firing parties for us, and they're constantly telling us, that we lost this person, but we haven't gained as many new people that go into it. And you don't get a whole lot of soldiers that join until they retire, when really to stay reconnected to that, they should be trying to find groups like that much earlier, like as soon as they get out, to help kind of bridge that gap between military life and civilian life, and the VSO organizations like the VFW, the American Legion, Polish American War Vets, AMVETS, Marine Corps League, stuff like that. Those groups are just such an amazing community to really help with that, to help you transition, to help you stay positive and connected to people that understand. And we've got such a huge problem right now with our military community with veteran suicide, and I think part of that is just losing touch with the community and our base of people that can kind of get us through these moments because they understand and get it, and that's what VSO groups are. That's what Military Funeral Honors is to me. Everybody that works in my office is either a soldier or a veteran, so I'm surrounded by people that understand to some extent, at least, the experiences I had here in the United States, the experiences I had in Iraq, and that level of comfort is just amazing. It's actually the same feeling I got. I don't know if you know about this program, Shades of Green at Walt Disney World.
No.
It's its own resort just for the military and Department of Defense community. So 2 months out of the year, if you're a veteran that isn't anymore, you can actually go and stay there. And going and eating at the restaurants at the Shades of Green Resort, it's some of the only times I've ever actually been able to have my back to a door in a restaurant and still feel comfortable. Because I know that every single person in that room served or somebody at that table was in, and that everybody there is probably going to have my back in case something happens. It's just such a great amount of comfort. And that's also kind of what VSO groups are too. You step into a VFW hall, everybody around you gets it.
And I love that you share that. I mean, you're sharing gold here. When you talk about community, it doesn't matter to me where you end up in a community, but that you find a community, right? I mean, that's what the Find Your Tribe initiative with Special Operations Charity Network is all about. That's why I lead the fishing program. That's why I lead something called the Incense Journey, where you're actually using fragrance to recenter. And when people go through it, it's amazing. I mean, usually, well, here, a quick story for you. You'll find this entertaining. When Mark Quinn, retired Command Sergeant Major, said, John, I'm going to have you, address a number of former SOF individuals. And I'm like, okay, well, did you tell them what I do? And he was like, oh, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, no, you didn't. Right. And so, I walk into the room and I'm like, and they're looking at me, and I'm pretty much in a three-piece suit, right? And I'm like, and I could tell by their body language, I'm like, gentlemen, I said, the retired CSM over here probably told you that you're going to be doing an incense journey and you're expecting a dirty hippie. Well, I'm not a dirty hippie, right? And so, it doesn't matter, whether you're into fragrance, whether you're into fishing, whether you're into cycling, whether you're into whatever. To your point from earlier, finding that the community really is the difference, right? Because if you don't reach out and find things that that resonate with you, then you're going to end up alone, and then we know how that ends in the most dramatic. So, speaking of ending, first of all, what you shared is just been gold. But for those that want to have their loved one have military honors, a military funeral, what's something that every family needs to be thinking about?
Well, John, so the biggest obstacle that we run into for families is making sure that you have a discharge on file for your loved one. So, if you're a veteran out there, or a retiree, somebody that's currently in, and you have a paper copy of your discharge, you need to get that in as many hands as you trust as possible, to make sure that when it's time, they don't have to come to us and say, hey, we want honors for our loved one, and we tell them, hey, we've got to have this discharge document or this certificate of retirement to verify, and they say, well, we don't have that. And at that point, we go to the state archive, which is housed in Jefferson City, and we say, hey, we got this veteran, here's his information, do you have any paperwork for him? And if they served here in Missouri, typically they've got something, and they send it to us, and we can just take care of the family, and it's not a big deal. The problem we run into is, like, if it's a veteran from another state, or somebody that served here, they just don't have it, which happens every once in a while. We get a letter back that says no records found, and then we go back to the funeral home or the family, and we say, hey, the state archives doesn't have anything. We have to put in a request to the National Archives, which is here in St. Louis, and sometimes, even though we get a little bit of a priority with them, it can take a couple weeks to get something back to them. If a family member has to request a discharge from the National Archives, it could take up to 6 months for them to get something back. And most families, when they want to get this all wrapped up at once, they want the funeral, the honors, everything done in the same time period, when everybody's here. They don't want to have to deal with, a lot of times, the grief of having to do, things twice over, the span of years or whatever it is. And if they don't have that documentation for us, we have to tell them we can't do it until they've got it. And then I'd say at least 90% of the time when we do that, a family never comes back and requests it again. And this is something that as a veteran, you've earned from the government, and your family has earned, for being a part of your life. I mean, the people in the military, they make a lot of sacrifices, but it's not just the people in the military that make those sacrifices, it's their families too. If you get deployed, it's 13 months that you're gone, that you're in danger, that you're going through hardship with your fellow soldier. But it's 13 months where your family doesn't have you, your kids don't have you, your parents don't have you. And, communication when you're in a combat zone or, on a deployment, it can be sparse sometimes.
Right.
Your parents hear something in the news, your kids watch something about a bombing, wondering if you were in that situation. And that's what they have to deal with back home. And the last thing you want to do is compound that, when it's time, and make another issue for them to worry about. Pre-planning is very, very important. Funeral homes offer those services. If you want to be interred in a national cemetery, you can go and get a pre-eligibility letter and leave things on file with the VA. It's super important to make sure that you take care of your family and you give them as few things to worry about when it's your time for honors and it's your time to have a funeral.
Yeah.
To make things as easy as possible. I mean, they're already, distraught. They call us, they're crying, they're unhappy, they're upset, they're telling us stories. I'll spend 30 minutes up to an hour sometimes on phone with a family,
right? And
they're just telling me things about your life, and that's great. I'm going to listen, and I've already gotten through the part that I need to do my job.
Yeah.
But we're part of your grieving process at Military Funeral Honors, and so if your family wants to tell us about this crazy story that you had in Iraq or this funny thing that you did when they first met you, that's what we're going to do.
Michael Anderson, first of all, you have made a lot of sacrifices today. You drove all the way down to Potosi, Missouri for the Old Man River Nature Retreat. I want you to enjoy that today. Enjoy the lake, enjoy the trails. This is really a sanctuary for active military veterans, first responders, and we're so proud to have them as a sponsor of None Left Behind. What is a favorite quote or piece of philosophy that you'd like to leave us with?
Community. I mean, my philosophy is community, service to others. Until the military is all about service to others and the community as a whole, and it's such a huge part of our life at Military Funeral Honors is service to others. And I didn't understand how important that was to me until after I left the military.
Yeah.
And I didn't even get it until I got this job.
Yeah.
That service to others component, you find that everywhere. With VSO groups, funeral honors, things of that nature. Find something to do to give back to the community somewhere, whether that's for veterans or civilians or anything of that nature. I promise mentally you will come off so much better for it. As a veteran, it's going to give you a lot of joy. And certainly wish more people could understand that to try to get them through, all the things that we've been going through.
Michael, that's great. All right. So if people are resonating with you and this conversation, with the magic of media, as you say how to get a hold of you, is going to appear right here on the screen. So how can people reach out?
I've got a lot of connections with the VSO groups around us. If you want to know how to get involved with one of the VSO groups, some volunteer opportunities, things that you can do, you're more than welcome to call my personal cell phone. That's area code 515-306-9422. If you've got questions specifically about Military Funeral Honors, you can call my office, or whoever. You either get me or whoever is sitting at my desk someday. That number hasn't changed in 20 years.
Yeah.
And that is 314-416-6651. That'll take you straight to Jefferson Barracks in St. Louis, Missouri. Whoever answers that phone will be happy to answer your questions.
Yeah. So, Michael, you talked a lot about sacrifice today, and I would just like to thank you for sacrificing your time and your energy. You've traveled all the way down here to Old Man River Nature Retreat. So please enjoy this wonderful facility, which is a sanctuary for active military veterans, first responders. Go fish on the lake, walk the trails, and I really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate it. For anybody that's watching this, this place is amazing.
Yeah.
I certainly hope you get a chance to come out here. The property out here is stunning and gorgeous. They've got places to stay, fishing, nature sounds everywhere. The sound of a creek and babbling brook running through, and it's the first thing I noticed when I walked up.
Yeah.
And I loved it. Closed my eyes and listened for a good solid 10 minutes.
Yeah, just the waterfall alone is pretty amazing. Yeah. All right, with that, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to continue on. Michael Anderson, reach out to him if he resonates with you, and we'll continue on building community, having honest conversations that help our active military, our veterans, and our first responders.
And I'd like to say one more thing, John. As a veteran or anybody that's going through hard times, if you are having dark thoughts, I tell everybody my cell phone number. If you're having any sort of thought and you want to talk to somebody, that you may never even meet or see again or whatever it is, so that you can offload on somebody that understands, please call my cell phone. if you got an issue and you think this is it, you're done, 2 o'clock in the morning, call my cell phone. My family understands. I've already told other people this. If I get a call at 3 o'clock in the morning, I will step away to talk to you. I'll take as much time as you want. You want to meet up and have a coffee, whatever it is, anything to keep you going. That 22 a day, it's heartbreaking.
Right.
Please reach out to me. If you don't want to talk to me, I can find somebody else to talk to. There's professionals out there, however it may be. It's super important to make sure that we get you from point A to point B, past whatever you're dealing with. So please reach out.
Thank you, Michael.
Of course. Thank you, John.
The battle doesn't always end when you come home. If you're active military, a veteran, or first responder struggling with PTSD, depression, or stress, there's help. The Special Operations Charity Network is here. Reach out at specopscharity.com, because none of us are meant to fight alone.